Morning, my name is Joseph Barr, and I'm the Director of Network Development East for Amtrak, working on service expansion projects throughout the East Coast from Maine to Florida. Pleased to be here with you to talk about Amtrak's new era for rail and how we create more trains for more people. One thing that Amtrak likes to do at the beginning of all our meetings and presentations is to have a safety and security briefing. And while I'm not going to go through every element of this, particularly given that we're doing this virtually, I did want to remind people to be aware of their safety and security, think about issues like emergency preparation, evacuation from wherever you're located, situational awareness about anything that's going on around you and any dangerous or compromising situations, your own health and welfare, and if you're not feeling well, and then security, both physical and cybersecurity, things like phishing traps, as well as just anything that's going on around you physically that might be unsafe. So normally I'd go into a lot more detail, but given the virtual environment and the time we have, I'm going to keep it short. So I wanted to start by just giving kind of a brief on where Amtrak is and where we're heading in the future. 2022 was not quite back to normal after COVID, but we were very close. We had almost 23 million trips, and of those, about 7 million were actually new customers using Amtrak for the first time. We had about 3,700 new hires, including myself. I started in October. And we have been adding back service, expanding service, and really trying to get capital projects underway, as I'll talk about in a minute. And many of you know, Amtrak's received significant funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and so we're starting to get to work on getting that money spent to improve passenger rail in the United States. As I said, there was $66 billion in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law for intercity passenger rail, which is really the largest investment in Amtrak that's ever been made in its history, even if you go back and sum everything up from before, particularly on the capital investment side. 22 billion of that goes directly to Amtrak to fund necessary state of good repair and replacement of rolling stock and things like that. But then 44 billion, so 2/3 of that will come through discretionary programs from the Federal Railroad Administration, of which there are a number currently soliciting applications, looking for projects that will help to make our passenger rail system better over the next 5+ years. One thing that we've really had to get good at and are working on getting good at, and is really important when you think about infrastructure and infrastructure durability, is capital delivery. How do you actually spend the money, spend it wisely, spend it on the projects that it needs to be spent on? So this kind of gives an idea of our new capital delivery function, because we are going to be spending much more money and doing much more work than we have in the past. And that goes for everything from how we deliver projects, the delivery strategies, to how we plan and develop projects and actually do that in a faster manner and get those projects moving, how we make sure that we're holding ourselves and everyone that works with us accountable for the works that's being done, and that all really kind of goes around good project controls and good project management, and making sure that we are being good stewards of the funds that have been made available to us through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We're working on rebuilding our infrastructure. Amtrak has not always been in a position, or has rarely been in a position, to invest in significant state of good repair projects. And so probably many of you have heard of the Gateway program, which sort of focuses on the new tunnel into the Hudson River, but includes a whole variety of other improvements in New York and New Jersey. The Frederick Douglass Tunnel, which the President Biden made an announcement about a couple of weeks ago, and that's a very significant project in the Baltimore area. Replacing the Connecticut River Bridge in Connecticut, rehabbing the East River tunnels in New York, and then just a whole range of state of good repair backlog projects that will spend billions and billions of dollars over the next several years. We currently have almost 150 active projects in our capital pipeline, and we're also testing out new delivery strategies, such as, at least new to Amtrak, such as construction manager and risk contracting. We're renewing the fleet. We are working on getting our new Acela train sets in service on the Northeast Corridor, as well as the new Amtrak Aero train sets, which will start serving intercity routes in a few years. And as some of you may have heard, we just started the process last month of replacing our long distance fleet. So those are the trains that go more than 750 miles. The most well-known example in New England is the Lakeshore Limited that goes from Boston and New York to Chicago. And going along with that, and really importantly, and sometimes forgotten, is the replacement of or upgrades to the yard and storage facilities to maintain and service and repair all of that equipment so that we can keep it going for hopefully maybe not quite as long as some of the equipment we have right now, but for many years in the future. And in fiscal year 23, we are, like I said, hopefully putting in service the new Acela trains, moving forward with the Amtrak Aero train sets, and then also moving forward in a more significant way with our long distance fleet replacement, while again making sure that our maintenance facilities are being upgraded to serve all of this new rolling stock. Changing topics a little bit to service expansion, which is really what my role is about in network development. In 2021, Amtrak released the Amtrak Connects Us plan, which provided a vision for what intercity passenger rail in the United States could look like in 2035 and beyond. And although this is not exactly what will wind up being implemented using the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law funding, it's really a starting point for all of those discussions. And the Federal Railroad Administration is currently soliciting proposals through its Corridor Identification and Development, or Corridor ID program, to be able to provide initial funding and then eventually much more significant design and construction funding for service expansion, hopefully all across the country, certainly in New England and the Northeast, but also well beyond that. And again, this map is not the final map, but it gives a vision for what this could look like in the future. The Corridor ID program itself was launched with the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It was established more formally by FRA in May 13th of last year. And then right towards the end of this year, they released this notice of corridor solicitation and funding opportunity for Corridor ID, with the applications due on actually March 27th now. That deadline has been extended very recently. And moving into project selections later this year, and then various reports to Congress, and then hopefully in the future more rounds of applications will be possible. And these is really the starting process for turning that map, or a version of that map, in partnership with states and other jurisdictions that help us, operate and pay for intercity passenger rail, to really see those new services get planned out, designed, go through the environmental permitting process, and then get up and running and actually running trains. And the network development group that I'm part of is really responsible for coordinating all of that work, from that initial idea and planning all the way through design, making sure there are vehicles available, making sure crews are trained, all the pieces that go into actually running a train, and then getting that train running, at which point obviously then it becomes part of our ongoing operation and sort of mainstreams back into the normal Amtrak process. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is just a little bit on our strategy on sustainability and resiliency. As these graphs show, we're seeing in some cases very significant increases in delays caused by sort of climate-related factors. So you see minutes of delay on the left and frequency of delay on the right. And one thing that's a significant consequence of increased heat is these heat orders, which means that we have to slow our trains down to avoid any safety issues and wheel slip issues that can happen. We are seeing some reduction in cold weather delays, although there are still very significant cold weather and winter weather related delays, as we've seen in certain parts of the country this year. But we're really seeing those heat order minutes of delay go up. We are also starting to see some increase in flooding delays, although I think that is something that is to come in the future. That's a very significant concern to us, particularly in some of the areas like the Connecticut shoreline, where we are right along the water and very vulnerable to sea level rise and other types of coastal flooding impact. So we've been taking on this challenge very seriously and trying to plan for it and then come up with strategies for how to address it. Focused initially on the Northeast Corridor, but this shows both our climate resilience strategic plan, but also the climate vulnerability assessment that helps tell us where are the biggest problems and where do we need to think about investments that will help deal with vulnerable assets and create a more resilient system so that we are able to continue to operate Amtrak service in a variety of locations in the future. So in that document, there's a whole series of priority actions that are expected to take place to help address vulnerability. So I'm not going to go through these obviously one by one, but this just gives you an example of a priority action to develop criteria for prioritizing asset upgrades, relocation, and adaptation measures, because despite all the money that we have available through the infrastructure law, it's still not enough to do everything we might want to do. And so we need to figure out what's most critical and what we need to do the most. So this gives a kind of a summary of the priority actions that are taking place, from dealing with how our people are trained and how they operate the system and how they think about planning for the system, to the practices, how we do our engineering and design work, integrating climate resiliency concerns into everything that we do, and then the assets that we have, again, using a very data-driven approach with, based on evidence of where's the greatest vulnerability, where's the greatest, investment return, in order to prioritize where we're going to invest in resiliency and other vulnerability strategies going forward. So with that, I will finish up. I just want to thank you for listening to my presentation, but also just in general, thank you for riding with us on Amtrak. We are the nation's passenger railroad, and we're very proud of the service that we provide, and we'd love to see even more of you riding our trains every day. Thank you very much.